Quetzalcoatl meant feathered serpent, or the available twin. Quetzalcoatl was one of the most important gods in the Aztecs that didn't demand for a sacrifice, because he always said that it's better to sacrifice something of yourself or you're just nothing in general. Very well known that Quetzalcoatl was also the one of compassion. Quetzal is the name Quetzal comes from the feather of the Quetzal bird and meant valuable. That is why they said the valuable twin, because both of them, once they were born out of the four directions and four elements, Quetzalcoatl was born alongside with his brother. Um, sorry, his brother name I forgot. Tezcatlipoca. Tezcatlipoca was also covered in feathers, and he was more like the dark side of the twins, while Quetzalcoatl was the light side of the twins. But even Quetzalcoatl couldn't escape from the demonization that they later did for against his creation of the earth, you might say. Creation of the earth that he did. He was, according to the Aztecs, very much involved into the creation of mankind and the creation of everything. The creation of mankind was also being called the creation of the five sons, the fifth sons. The second son was the one that Quetzalcoatl created. Quetzalcoatl created the mankind, but also the entire universe. The entire universe that we know now in this place was a creation of Quetzalcoatl. With his air, he created mankind, or even also animals and everything that is in life. He created inside of the second son. So you might believe that the sons and daughters of Quetzalcoatl were the ones that are being born inside of the second son. Every sun is one entire existence. Once an entire universe is wiped out, so the second sun begins. When the sun just dives again and just disappears, then it's time again for an entire new universe. So, I don't know which kind of sun we are in now. In front of Quetzalcoatl, I don't know if we are in Quetzalcoatl's sun or not. But I know that there are a lot of brothers and sisters that are even awakened by Quetzalcoatl. So yeah, he was not alone. He was not alone. He and together with his feathered, feathered brother, he um, he ruled over this earth inside of the second sun. There are several stories about Quetzalcoatl's offspring, where he comes from. He should be born out of the four elements, but also out of the four directions of the earth. So the four elements, whenever you try to call Quetzalcoatl, then you have to point yourself into every single direction, because he is born out of four. Four is the number of Quetzalcoatl, and so that is also so they can believe that every important god rules over the five sons. So even the brother of Quetzalcoatl is named Tezcatlipoca. Oh my goodness, that is a difficult name. Of course, Quetzalcoatl in itself is also a difficult name. In the Aztecs, they always made they didn't say really a name. They did more like a description, like he that does, ruled over the sun. He that, and Quetzalcoatl was more like, yeah, that is a bit controversial. Quetzalcoatl is more like the light inside of the darkness. That is what Quetzalcoatl said. Quetzal is the feather of the bird. The feather, Quetzalcoatl, and Coatl in itself is more like a king, or someone who stands above, but also gave the description of the one that had light inside of the darkness. Later on, they said, I'm so sorry about this, but yeah, you can say to every single dragon god, they are all demonized, all of them. Tiamat is very much demonized as the queen of darkness and the queen of chaos. Of course, Fafnir is already been demonized as the one that go against their saint, the Saint George, that he killed the one, killed Fafnir, and then everything was fine. Everything was going against God's plan. I mean, for God's plan. And then, of course, you have Leviathan, the fifth king of hell, they say. But yeah, like I said, Quetzalcoatl couldn't escape this demonization and also got the name Morning Star. But in fact, inside of the Aztec community, the Morning Star was something good. It showed the way inside of the great darkness, and so it was covered in feathers. So every time when I go inside of the forest and I see a feather, and that is why my altar is covered in feathers, because of Quetzalcoatl, because he represented the air. He was filled with it. So every time when I see a bird, when I see someone in feathers, I just I just respect it very much because they are offspring of Quetzalcoatl. They rule the air. And so every time when I see this, I mean, this was the gold of the Aztecs. Whenever they see gold, it was more like a lesser absence. I mean, it was not so important. Of course, gold was beautiful, so they covered a tomb with it, but it was not as important as a feather. It's a gift from the gods, they said, and that is why it's because Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca was also covered in feathers, so they were divine. They were divine of the four elements and the five suns. They were children of it, and so they now can create life, and that is what Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca did. They both created life, but Quetzalcoatl was more like the light side, while his twin brother, was more like the dark side. And there is a really good, interesting anecdote that I wanted to share with this misguidance and just example of how Tezcatlipoca despised his brother Quetzalcoatl. When they were in the earth as flesh and blood, when they embodied themselves before their people in flesh and blood, they embodied themselves as human beings with feathers everywhere. But this Capquiloca, just to make Quetzalcoatl just make a fool of himself, he made his brother drunk. His very much brother. He made his brother drunk. It could be he knew how it should be, how to put his brother drunk, and so he also had a sister. They had a sister, also from one of the rulers of every side, every direction. And also another element. She was also another element. I mean, he had sexual intercourse with his own sister, um, also being called Quetzal. And once he was sober, once he knew what he was done, he was so embarrassed of himself that he admitted for suicide. He threw himself into the fire, and later in his ashes he transformed in a pack of birds. So he just go back again inside of the great void. So inside of the great void he escaped because he was embarrassed too much, because in his time on earth, in flesh and blood, he had intercourse with his own sister, and he could not handle this sacrilegion, against his mothers and fathers that he had, against his sister, against this. He was embarrassed very much, so he wanted to go to leave this place again, so never to return, and so to be this one place inside of the great darkness. And since then they called him the Morning Star. So he did adultery. He did something that he was not proud of. His heart was ascending to the heavens, where the Morning Star stood still. And that is why also, because of this, Quetzalcoatl was also being compared with what is now being called the Morning Star, Lucifer, but in fact are two different kind of spirits. But both of them are being called the Morning Star. So yeah, the legend of Quetzalcoatl is in fact not really legend. It was really something that people believed in, and something where, I mean, if you want something of Quetzalcoatl inside of your altar, then a feather, of course. A feather is everything. When you find a feather, it's just the air in itself. It gives the ability to fly, and it is what Quetzalcoatl had, the ability to fly. He was Lord of the Air. But in the other side of the world, they just had the same entity. They worshipped, and I can say that this might be the same entity, and that was Shenlong. Shenlong, the one of the air. The Shenlong was also one with the air in itself, and he could fly through it, just from dimension to dimension. Sometimes even to this day, they can still see him just swimming inside of the sky. And Quetzalcoatl or Shenlong, then they was always covered in more like he had a green color. This green color was of the feathers that he had, and of course, like I said, he was the light version of the twin brothers that they had, and because he wanted to get rid of his brother, he he did something like this, and later on, his brother Tezcatlipoca was being also called as the one of dark magic, the one of that is being called now the Dark Lord. Uh, his brother, of course. Quetzalcoatl not. Quetzalcoatl is being called the Morning Star, but later, later they both combined him as one and the same, and they called them both the Morning Star and the Dark Lord, of course. So the Dark Lord, you can say the Dark Lord, but it's in fact not. It's a dualism between dark and light, and Quetzalcoatl was the one of the light, the one of creation, the second son, the second creation. The second creation of this entire universe was completely out from his. According to the stories of the Aztecs, the universe will cease to exist after the fifth sun. The fifth sun will continue, and of course to exist. And later, when this is having a sunset, then later on, then everything becomes from the gods, and there will be no creation at all. That is why sometimes they said that the Mayan calendar of the Aztec calendar is showing the end of the world, the end of times. But when is the end of the world? Will it be the entire end of everything, the fifth sun, or is it just the second sun or the third sun? So every sun is being controlled by one of the main gods. Quetzalcoatl is one of them. So, my brothers and sisters, once you go inside of the forest and you see just a feather, of just a pigeon, something that people just don't see as something important. It comes from something that is alive. It comes from something that is descended from Quetzalcoatl, a god from the air, a god that also make us awaken, a God where we can talk to, a wisest among all of them. That is always being said that he was the wisest among all of them. And also, I learned a lot from his teachings. I learned a lot from his teachings that a lot of brothers and sisters go against what I am being taught. Teached of compassion. I'm teached to have compassion. I'm teached to see through the eyes of another, or having this empathy from animals and humans alike. That is why I also see the attributes from animals whenever you could lay them here. They are created by Quetzalcoatl, not a building, not a fancy statue. Of course, this statue means something for me, but it's still man-made. This is not. This is made by Quetzalcoatl, and all of his beings inside of the air are one with him. And now I'm laying this down as one of my altar, one with my dragons. Quetzalcoatl is one with all of us. My brothers and sisters, be blessed.